They put a 4.5-foot rattlesnake in his fucking mailbox. They even removed the rattler to keep it quiet. 4.5 fucking feet. These things are very deadly. It bit him and put him in the hospital for 11 days, and he has since suffered lifelong complications from the venom poisoning, requiring monthly blood transfusions. They fucked him up for life.
That's so fucked up. That's so fucked up. So fucked up. That's so fucked up.
Hey everyone, this is one of your favorite two hosts from That's So Fucked Up, Ashley Richards. This is an episode that I recorded with the amazing Jen Carole quite a few months ago when we were still planning on doing a season of That's So Fucked Up Presents called Culty California. Now we're not sure when or if that season will come out, so we didn't want this collecting dust on the shelves any longer. So please enjoy probably the only episode ever of That's So Fucked Up Presents Culty California. Today we're talking about the Synanon cult, and I'm joined by my co-host, who is a survivor, a comedian, at least in my opinion, writer, coach, and crafter, Jen Carole. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Ashley. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Thank you for coming on. I had so much fun interviewing you over on our TSFU Patreon exclusive interview where we got to chat with you. I was like, I need to ask Jen back on because I think we would have a really fun time talking about a cult. And Jen, you live in California, so that was apropos as well.
Yep, born down in Southern California that we're going to talk about, but also now live in Northern California. And this cult really got around the state. So you picked a good candidate with me.
Oh my God, yay. I'm so excited to talk about it. All right, so I actually used an episode of a podcast. I hardly ever use podcasts as sources because it's just hard for me to sit down and take notes while listening, but not watching anything. Documentaries work a lot better for me. But I listened to a podcast because I was camping, and it's called Behind the Bastards, and they did a great coverage on this. The host of that show used to be a journalist, and he hosts 8 other podcasts or something. So
yeah, it's actually kind of hard to find stuff about Synanon. When you think about it, the podcast is a good find.
It was a really good find.
Yeah, there's just not a lot out there.
Yeah, which is crazy because I swear it is almost Scientology level insane, except for that it just didn't last. But if it had, it would be right there with Scientology or maybe even crazier.
I totally agree. Some of the members still think of it as one of the best experiences of their life. And maybe it's that confluence of post-60s, post-drug renaissance that happened, in the 70s, and something about the kind of people that ended up at Synanon that they didn't talk about it a lot when they got out. It just didn't affect them in the way that we've heard other ex-cult people talk.
Yeah. Also, I think that sometimes when people are in the lower level of cults, they can have a pretty good experience. Often I hear it's
it's like the Girl Scout cookie level of
they had a gay old time. Yeah, if they stay at brownie level.
That's right.
I think in the Girl Scouts, it's daisies, then brownies.
Yeah, they started it when they're younger now, yeah.
Juniors, cadets. If they stay at the brownie level, I think they can make good friends and maybe learn some things and whatnot. And from what I have usually heard, it's the higher up you get into the cult, the worse you get treated, the worse your experience is.
So basically like corporate America without the high paycheck.
I think corporate America is a cult.
Thank you. And I am a survivor. Yes. Oh my God. Now that I have to go back and rethink my whole life, that I've belonged to a cult my whole life, I'm going to need to come back for the next podcast. Ashley, I'm a mess. Holy crap.
Well, yeah, I've never been in corporate culture, but my co-host on TSFU told me that one time when they were doing a training at one of her new jobs for a corporate position, they all sat in a circle and talked about the most traumatic experiences of their lives. And I was like, how is that appropriate? Trauma bonding, just right off the bat.
It's actually worse. And yeah, gosh, I'm just realizing there's a whole bunch I could talk about trauma bonding in corporate settings, because somehow they have learned that technique and it absolutely is in play, but they call them offsites and team building. So there you go. There's the language to call those two things.
Oh my gosh, we should totally actually talk about that though at some point.
Yeah, it's like just another whole podcast.
No, I know.
Bring us back to Synanon, but holy crap.
Because they'll send you to like team building retreats and such, right?
That's right. To get you raw so that you share those feelings and get to trust. You have to trust your teammates, don't you know? Even though, what's the rate of sexual assault inside corporations? It's so high. So
really?
Again, this is a whole separate podcast, but boy, yeah. Anybody listening who works at a corporation right now, good for you. You got a paycheck. And oh my God, I'm so sorry.
You're fascinating me. I didn't know that there was a high rate of sexual assault, but I do know that like 80% or like I should never say numbers because I don't ever actually know them. But a high percentage of the highest people in corporate America, the CEOs and whatnot, are like pretty high on the psychopathy scale because...
Oh, yes. Narcissism. That's right.
To be able to make decisions like I'm going to lay off 1,000 people and ruin their lives so that I can get a jet.
So this is really important because what you're bringing up is absolutely who is leading Synanon was a narcissist, a sociopathic narcissist.
Thank you for bringing me back because I was...
Well, thank you. Every time. There we go. I'm here all week. So, but the tie-in is not lost on me as someone who has worked for these narcissists, to think about the parallels from what I've been through in my life and who I've worked for and what they've requested of us and what happened at Synanon with a man who everyone acknowledges loved the sound of his own voice.
Oh, yeah. And we'll talk about that actually, because I'm going to start off with a brief history of alcoholism, which is what the host of Behind the Bastards did. And I thought that was kind of a really cool thing or some really cool information to include, because I think that it kind of gives some background as to how we end up here. It actually starts off pretty crazy, though, because alcoholism is wild. I can tell you from, 15 years of experience, like active experience. I have been sober for 4 years now. But yeah, it's a pretty crazy journey. And beer and wine have been around legit since humans have been. It's since humans started, living on Earth. They were like, how do we get fucked up?
Yes.
So beer and wine have been kind of around forever, but hard liquor was born in the 1600s. And by the 1700s, people were starting to talk about alcoholism as a real social problem. So it was kind of like once hard liquor came into the picture, that's when, heavy drinking to the point of alcoholism really became a problem. And I'm sure before the 1700s, I'm sure, like kind of as soon as it came around, it probably became pretty problematic. So the first support groups for alcoholism were called sobriety circles, and these were actually started by Native American tribes. I thought that was a really interesting fact.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
It's like they understand community healing, so that really blows my mind.
Exactly. So as a lot of us know, alcoholism does tend to be pretty big on reservations, which is, understandable to me for how we've, treated them throughout the centuries. So I think that, it is really cool that kind of the first sobriety groups were amongst those groups because they recognized, hey, this is a problem for us. And I think the best way to overcome it is with community. And that is certainly not how the Western world was handling alcoholics. In the 1800s, they were sent to mental hospitals. By the 1880s, Freud had thought that he had come up with a really great cure for morphine addicts and alcoholics, and that was to give them huge doses of cocaine.
Nothing better than a well-lit drunk. There we go. I'm drunk and I have all the energy now. Let's go shape America. It's fantastic.
Oh my God. Yeah. Freud, dude, he was wild, man. So in the 1890s, they started sending alcoholics to what were called foul wards of hospitals. I don't even know exactly what that means, but it sounds mean.
Is that like named after birds or foul with an O-U-L?
Yeah, not just alcoholics and birds in one hospital. That's
right. Oh, wait, they coined the name wild turkey. Just saying. Sorry.
In 1901, the first luxury rehab was opened by Charles B. Townsend, and it cost up to $12,500 for a 5-day stay in today's money.
So for $12,500, I get to spend 5 days at a luxury asylum, a luxury place where what are they going to do to me when I get there?
Oh, so yeah, you're going to have a lot of fun. He used what was called the belladonna treatment, and it's a long definition. I encourage you to look it up if you're curious, but I will tell you from what I could see, it looks really fucked up. It includes morphine, deadly nightshade, strychnine.
Yeah, the near-death experience, I think they called it. Yes.
Didn't sound like a good time at all.
No. Belladonna hasn't stayed around as a popular drug because it's just not that popular. So this has got to be miserable. Strychnine? Oh my God. How do people survive this place?
I think it said every 4 hours or something. Again, don't quote me on numbers.
They pay money for this.
A lot of money. I'd probably rather go to the mental hospital. Although, you know what? I think a mental hospital in the 1900s, the early 1900s, was probably a pretty big bummer.
Yeah.
You're either with a bunch of birds or a bunch of other people who are foul, whatever that means.
Yes.
And also, the founder of AA, Bill Wilson, was a frequent patient of Charles B. Townsend. But in 1935, AA started because apparently the many rounds of belladonna treatment didn't work. So he actually adopted the sobriety circle idea. I don't know if he knew that he was doing that. That's certainly not in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says that he went to a hospital and realized that the only way that he could keep himself sober was by getting other drunks sober. I don't believe there's any mention of Native American sobriety circles, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just left that out,
It's super interesting after all those treatments and this man having been through those god-awful treatments that he finally realized accountability is a big factor in change, no matter what your change is. Someone cares that you're changing matters. And I guess the hospital wasn't enough. So here we have him appropriating the sobriety circle as AA.
Yes, ma'am. And just to go back a couple decades really quick for this fun tidbit, in the 1910s, they started sterilizing addicts and alcoholics. And when they were prosecuting Nazi war criminals, that's just one thing they didn't prosecute them for. They're like, yeah, we're just going to look the other way on that one because we're doing that too. So
that's so interesting, though. What you're really revealing is centuries of shame for someone who gets addicted to alcohol. No accountability to the hard alcohol industry that figured out a way to concentrate it and get much more powerful in our bodies and not give a crap about what it does to our bodies or our brains, making us addicted. But we have the legacy of centuries of guilt, shame, and frankly,
abuse.
Yeah, you're not human. You're not an equal human.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that trope play out once again for people who are addicted to a substance. Fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I really wanted to include all of that because I do think that's very fascinating because as we'll see with good old Chuck, addicts and alcoholics will continue to be dehumanized in his program. And we will talk about that when we get back from this short commercial break. Okay, and we are back. So let's get into a little bit of Charles before Synanon. Charles Chuck Dietrich was born in Toledo, Ohio in March 1913. His dad was an alcoholic who died in a drunk driving accident when Charles was 4. And after his death, his mother really made him the man of the house. She treated him more like a partner than a child, which is known as emotional incest. It can also be called enmeshment, but it's when exactly like it says. You don't treat your child as if you're their parent. You treat them as if they're your friend or partner or confidant. Just inappropriate boundaries. And the reason it's called emotional incest is because it's not sexual, but it's just emotionally and mentally inappropriate boundaries.
And it basically strips away a kid's ability to be a kid. Suddenly you're a mini adult responsible for dealing with adult things when you should be protected from that as a child and off doing your kid stuff like, burning ants with a magnifying glass. What do kids do? Kids had fun back there in the 1913s.
It's so funny, though, that you say that because I hate that example in particular is often so used as, oh, boys will be boys. And it's like, so little man children torturing animals to death is just because, let's be frank, sure, it's just an ant, but it's a living thing. And it's like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to watch this thing die? But boys will be boys. I don't know. I think that's fucking crazy to have that mentality kind of drilled into you super early on. That doesn't make you like a fucking psychopath.
I think it's horrible.
See?
It's like what's so sad about it? It's another trope that instantly when I thought of children playing, that image came to me, which is fucked up. But that's what I saw as a little boy with no toys to speak of, because back in the day, there weren't a lot of toys.
Yeah, but like a ball and a stick.
I mean, kids were working because that's how it worked in the family. But you're right. I do think that there's a sadistic trend there. I don't understand why that's fun.
No, it's weird. It's very weird. I've always thought, well, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion about how, in society, it's boys are told at a young age, boys don't cry, and, anger is an acceptable emotion, but sadness isn't. And then like you torturing animals is just boys will be boys. So it's like, no wonder men grow up with, and I'm not like hating on men saying all men are terrible, but it's like they're brought up with a terrible mentality.
Yeah, that machismo kind of value is interesting because it does tie in to the synanon situation. We're going to see how that ties in. So these ideas of masculinity and what makes you manly, at least in terms of the culture, is definitely part of synanon.
I love you, Jen, because you keep bringing me back. So emotional incest, right? That's where we were. But like you were saying, it doesn't give the child an opportunity to be a child. And when he was 8 years old, his little brother died of the flu and he felt a survivor's guilt and like he hadn't protected his brother. So he really didn't, I think, get to have a childhood. And it said that after his brother's death, he couldn't bond with any children, even his own, when he eventually had some. Then when he's 12, his mother remarries, and this causes Chuck to start rebelling and acting out. And at this age, he starts heavily drinking. He does complete high school and goes to Notre Dame, but he flunks out, and his life continues to be ruled by alcoholism. He loses a good job with Gulf Oil, and he also loses his first wife to the bottle. And at age 29, he catches meningitis, which almost kills him and leaves his face partially paralyzed with a droopy eye and a facial tic on one side. So Chuck moves to Santa Monica, which is in California, for anybody who doesn't realize that.
Southern California. That's right. It's right on the beach.
Yes. And back then, it actually wasn't considered a super desirable part of town to live in. So he worked at a hardware store, but was definitely still able to live in the area. And he eventually lost that job as well as his second wife to booze. So at one point, a friend finds Chuck on the floor and says to him, quote, "Fatso, if you do not go to Alcoholics Anonymous, you will die." I don't know if he was severely overweight or if that was just a nickname, but
well, photos of him, he's a little bit chunky, definitely has the belly. I think all that, he probably had that gross, bloated look you get when you drink a lot of alcohol. Just that puffy, Stay Puffed Snowman kind of look. So
maybe that's why later he had that real tough love approach, because fucking insult to injury, like, hey, fatso. maybe he's like, you know what? That just him being a total dick really helped me. So I'm going to go ahead and do that too. Maybe that was like a really pivotal point and we don't even know.
Yeah, or it just basically catered to his self-loathing. He had such self-loathing. It's so clear. I mean, who could love him? His mother left him when he was for another man. His brother left him because he died. His wives left him. This man, I mean, I would be hard-pressed to figure out why anybody would love me after what's been going on, both things that he could and couldn't control. But I suspect he was laying on that floor in quite the puddle of self-loathing as well. So he may have heard that guy because he agreed with him.
Yeah, and sometimes you need to hear somebody else say it to you. And after that, he gets his shit together and starts to go to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And he quickly becomes an AA kind of like rock star, speaking in front of the groups. It's totally his jam. I was in AA for years, and I remember there would be like kind of like AA celebrities. It'd be like, oh, so-and-so speaking at fucking wherever tonight. I would like love to go on a cult podcast and talk about how AA is, I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like I needed that shit at first. I was a bad alcoholic and I think I really needed that, but there's some culty shit going on in there too. Some real culty aspects. So also it's not really surprising that AA was a stepping stone and the, just the attention and notoriety he got there. People just loved to hear him speak. So he became obsessed with AA like he was with alcohol. And at this point, he fully dedicated himself to helping other alcoholics by surviving on unemployment checks and other random charity. We'll actually bookmark for that later.
Interesting. Okay.
Because
color me intrigued. Yes.
Yeah. So at some point, you know, LSD studies were like the jam at this time. So he volunteers for one and has this apparently amazing cathartic breakthrough. And when he gets done, he's like, I am like totally functioning on a higher level than everybody now. He was like on his high horse after this LSD breakthrough.
There's nothing better than an LSD empowered individual. Oh my God. That's who I want to follow right off the cliffs. That LSD inspired individual.
Leading thousands of people. Yeah, it's good stuff. So now he's like, okay, I know what I'm going to do next. He had met some heroin addicts and seen them turned away from AA. And AA actually is pretty strict about how the group is not for addicts and how addicts and alcoholics are different. And there was really nowhere for addicts to go at this time. So he decides that there should be a separate addiction program that should include all types of addicts, which I'm totally on board with. And sadly, addiction all around the world is something that, you know, the medical community and just regular people alike are still trying to figure out, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years later. Like, I mean, the relapse rate when people leave rehab is like huge. AA stats are super hard to get a hold of. Plus, it's like a little bit culty. So it is still really a big societal problem that continues to like evade
a solution.
Solutions.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is like, I'm still on board. He starts a small group and calls it the Tender Loving Care Club. You know, it's like, yeah, maybe some TLC will fix me.
Wait, do we know what year this is? Because that is just so 60s. This is the Tender Loving Care Club. I could just like, oh yeah, that has everything about put your keys in the bowl tone to it. But yes,
oh
sure
my
thing.
gosh, put your keys in the bowl. Bow, chicka, bow, wow.
Yeah,
I wasn't
we
there,
went
but I know what you're saying. I think at this time, yeah, we're probably somewhere in the 60s.
Yeah, I think we're probably in the 60s. By the way, I wasn't there either. Neither were my mom and dad. We kind of sandwiched in between. But I've read the stories. Seen Valley of the Dolls. Come on, man.
Wait, what is that? Color me intrigued.
Oh, Valley of the Dolls?
Yeah.
Okay, children, gather round. Valley of the Dolls was like one of the first addict. It talked about alcoholism and drug abuse, but it was among the pretty women of, I think it was, maybe it was a made up community, but it was kind of like a Los Angeles feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have not, this is a good one to go Netflix and chill on this one, Valley of the Dolls. I don't know where it's streaming, but it is old school, it's vintage, and it's all about all the naughtiness of back then. And the dolls, of course, are the women, because a lot of the women who everybody thought were living perfect lives in the 50s had to anesthetize themselves in the 60s and 70s because, my God, look what they married and how did they get stuck in this house and why am I cooking and cleaning for everybody? Make it stop.
I'm going to burn my bra.
Yeah.
That'll show them.
That'll show them. I know, yeah.
Side note, I refuse to wear bras 90% of the time, like unless it's absolutely necessary. Fuck society and your tit traps. They hurt. I don't like it.
Well, I'm going to say, I think if you did a poll, men are probably pro no bras anyway. So if that's the audience that we're caring about, now, personally, I'm into personal comfort, but I'm just saying it's weird how these things start. You know, my mom was very pro bra because she didn't want anything showing. Okay, Mom, thanks.
I'm like, meh, whatever. And actually, 1958. So we're moving right into the 60s. So you're right. Okay. So the Tender Loving Care Club rents a small storefront in a rougher area of Venice, and they showered using a hose running through a window.
Now, this is Venice, California, for anybody paying attention. It's right near Santa Monica. So if you get confused, and we'll just make sure you know where we are. We're still in California on the beach.
There we go. Thank you. And apparently they survived on stolen food. And here's where the charity comes back in. And donations from sex workers. How these sex workers are already out there doing the worst job. Then they're paying their pimps. And then you're like, hey, can we get a couple bucks too? We're trying to stay sober.
Did they say there were monetary donations?
They survived on food and blowjobs. Hey. Hey.
Come on. The sex workers part makes me so mad. Wait a minute.
No, I couldn't even believe that. But I mean, that's what I heard and read.
Okay.
So
I know that's what they're telling the story. The people who were there told the story, but holy moly.
What the fuck?
Well, it was the Tender Loving Care Club. So there you go. There was a theme.
And let's go exploit some of the, we're very vulnerable members of society. Let's go exploit other vulnerable members of society because that's super chill. So now, you know what? Tender Loving Care Club. I was on board because of the name. Now I'm off the train because of the
creep factor.
Sex worker donations. You fucking assholes. Go work. Go get a job. And on that note, we're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. Okay, friends, we are back. So they're living in this Venice storefront, and this is short-lived because code inspectors said that this was a non-inhabitable structure, but they did manage to find a vacant National Guard building on the Santa Monica beach. I don't know if they just squatted there or if they rented it.
They must have squatted. My goodness, I'm trying to think where that would have been. But yeah, I can understand the retail. This space is for retail. You can't just live here.
Yeah, you can't.
It's just not a thing.
You can't shower with a hose out of the fucking. We're trying to run a cafe next door, you guys.
No. Ew.
Your fucking water is splashing onto our guests' meals. The neighbors weren't friends or fans.
Yeah, I'm sure they were not. Yeah.
The sudden influx of dope fiends, which is what Chuck called them, which I find is interesting because as somebody who has struggled with addiction and alcoholism and who sometimes was just Narcotics Anonymous meetings are cooler than AA meetings. I would go to both. Definitely some people would be like, hey, what's up? My name's blah, blah, blah. I'm a dope fiend. And we'll see throughout the story and as we go throughout time, how much of Chuck's influence has really remained in the addiction recovery circles, which is really scary and fucked up.
It's also interesting because he's appropriating a term that were used by the conservatives of the time to marginalize and put down addicts, right? Dope fiend was big language in conservative politics at that time because the 60s were starting to gain momentum and it was seen as people that were into free love were all drug addicts and bad guys and hippies that didn't want to serve in the war and wanted this thing called peace and didn't want war. So it's interesting that he chose dope fiends as a term to use, considering it was already in the culture in a different way.
Is it though? Because is this not just the beginning of him dehumanizing them?
Ah,
It's
yes.
like the main culture is dehumanizing you. So I'm going to go ahead and do that too. But he probably was like, in a lovable way, though. You bunch of dope fiends, you knuckleheads.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome here. I'm here to fix you is really his message, right? Dope fiends, I'm here to fix you.
Oh, yeah. And gosh, put a fucking note in that too, because what later becomes his welcome slogan is really that in different verbiage. So weirdly, the Santa Monica residents were like not super stoked on a bunch of drug addicts suddenly inhabiting their neighborhood and beaches. So they launched a formal complaint. And since good old Chuck was operating a rehab facility without a license, he was arrested. And he could have abandoned Synanon and the property and avoided jail time. But he chose jail time, and because of this made him a martyr/hero. And they got a ton of support from surrounding communities sloganizing "Save Synanon." If somebody gets prosecuted and like sent to jail or hung up on a cross,
Yeah, I was going to say this is such a pivotal moment in cult culture because once you can show that your good guy has suffered for you, has somehow paid some price on your behalf. Look what he has done for you, which, by the way, guys, he's never doing it for you. This is so, as we're going to find out, there's a narcissistic component here. This is for him.
Yeah. Also, they're living in like shambles, like they're probably squatting. Like he's about to go get 3 hots and a cot for a couple weeks. Like he's chilling, They're still like squatting and stealing food. Like he's fine.
Yeah, he's going to have some free time to write, to plan, to think things through.
Yeah.
We're not making jail sound fun, but it is just jail, not prison, right? It's jail.
Well, I've actually heard that prison is better than jail because in prison, like you get more of the like sometimes the dorm situation and whatnot, and jail is just pretty like small cell.
I think for him though, it probably worked.
And this is so dumb because these are two like supposedly trustworthy outlets. His jail time raised his profile and he got a 14-page expose in Time magazine and a favorable profile in the New York Times.
Welcome to America, where the worse you are, well, it wasn't bad yet, but we just have a way of making heroes of the weirdest people. America.
Oh my God. Don't even get me started. So Chuck got a huge outpouring of public support after all this like favorable media. And with that outpouring of public support, including from the governor of California, he was able to get legislation passed to get Synanon exempted from health licensing laws, which is, the trouble has already started so many times, but this is also where some trouble starts.
It's interesting that he thought if that was what he needed to do, is that this thing doesn't need health licensing. Now, I'm not sure what he was doing that might have needed licensing. If he was dispensing and stuff, you need licensing. So it's interesting how he walked that line and what it is that Tender Loving Care Circle was doing that even would be considered something that needed to be licensed.
Yeah, I actually don't know. But I do know that later they were exempt from tax laws, and it's a big misconception that it's because they were a religion, because Chuck did try to get them religious status eventually, but was never able to. But they were exempt from tax laws because they were a charitable drug and alcohol rehab facility.
Yeah, he tried the Church of Synanon, right? That was one of his adventures, is let's go get rid of this tax bill, because who wants to pay taxes?
Not me. I get it, Chuck.
Yeah. You know you've made it when you can stop paying taxes. That's how you know you've really had success in America.
Yeah, you're like, I'm slippery as fuck.
When you figured that angle out, you are fucking killing it. That's right.
You're killing it here in America. This really put Chuck and Cinnamon. This really put Chuck and Synanon on the map. And A-list celebs like Charlton Heston, Jane Fonda, and Leonard Nimoy would drop by to play what was called The Game. And we'll get more into this later. But just imagine any one of those people.
Moses. Yes, Charlton Heston, again, children gather round. That's Moses from the Ten Commandments. And we have, of course, Leonard Nimoy from Star Trek. And then you said Jane Fonda.
Yeah.
And Jane Fonda from the movie Coming Home, which if you haven't watched that movie, is the best, how do I say this? Oral sex scene you've ever seen. So there you go.
Yeah, she
That's
was...
right. John Voight and Jane Fonda. There you go.
She was hot shit back in the day, right?
That's right.
So just imagine, though, any one of those three just like mercilessly yelling at you and calling you names. Like fucking Leonard Nimoy from Star Trek.
Why were they yelling at each other?
We'll get into that.
Aha.
But just Leonard Nimoy being like, you fucking worthless piece of shit. You're just like, dude, what? Like, imagine what a trip that is. So you're off drugs, but you're still tripping. So, I mean, because that. And eventually non-alcoholics or addicts, who are called squares, were also able to move into the into the synanon compound if they gave up everything. Classic. Am I right?
Right. I'm already a square and I have to give up everything? What do I have? What is it that I have as a square?
Just
What
this
am I
like
giving up?
this way of life that Chuck is starting
Lasagna?
to form.
I sound like Garfield.
Peanut
but
butter
am I giving up-
sandwiches.
Thank you.
No,
Bologna.
peanut butter sandwiches, coffee, and cigarettes were dispensed like candy. You had access to those three things all day and night. The peanut butter sandwich, just Chuck really liked those, but the coffee and cigarettes is a very common addict thing. Any AA meeting you go to has coffee, and a lot of the members will be outside smoking. So if you ever drive past a church and see like a big people outside of it smoking, that's an AA or NA meeting. Jen's giving you the dirt on the 60s and 70s, and I'm giving you the dirt on the world of addiction.
Like, take your cameras because they're anonymous, right? But now you have your blackmail opportunity. So it's another big American value, how to blackmail each other. So there you go.
Good old Chuck, full of American values. So he gained a significant following and incorporated the Tender Hearts Club into the Synanon Foundation in 1958. And synanon is a word that he made up integrating togetherness, sin, with anon from anonymous. He fucking like stole that from AA. I feel like a lot of other cult leaders, he just kind of like cherry picked what other people did. He was like, I liked what Jim Jones did there. Loved what Koresh did here. I'm actually just picking random cult leaders, but he like definitely just fucking cherry picked. And it began as a 2-year residential program, but Chuck soon concluded that as addiction was something you could never fully recover from, you couldn't actually ever graduate from the program, aka Synanon forever.
My master's degree. Yeah, that was my master's degree. It took all 6 years, 364 days to finish. I could never graduate. So you join Synanon. I did graduate. I did it all right up to the last day. But
I will never
the idea of
get a master's.
Something where you can't graduate is crazy. Can you imagine? I'm going to come to your program and I will never finish. I just come and here I am.
No, I don't like it at all. But it was a very different mentality back then, right?
Well, so it's 1958. We're emerging into the early 60s. Kennedy's still alive for a little while, but he's going to be killed, which is going to destroy the youth of America, meaning not the little kids, but the young 20s. They're going to just be
who were full
crushed.
of hope.
Yeah. And remember, then we have 5 years later, we're going to see Martin Luther King assassinated. And that's in the heat in the middle of the civil rights. We're at war in Vietnam. And then we watch Bobby Kennedy get assassinated. So these are externally outside of this. You're all focused on your alcoholism and your addiction, but externally, the world's going to go pretty sideways in the next 10 years for the people who are young at this time, young adults.
So, I mean, I can see why it could be alluring to go to this place where you'd be surrounded by other people who are also living the kind of life that you're trying to live, drug and alcohol free, and outside society is looking pretty fucked up.
And when it starts, you have your kids there. You come with your spouse. You come with your children.
Yeah.
You can bring the whole squad to Synanon. And it does look like it's kind of in that, I don't know that we've even termed the term commune yet, but it's coming. Communes are going to be a thing shortly. So it's kind of right on the edge of where the culture's going for a part of our society.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you mentioned parents because, like you said, the whole fam could come. You know, even if you were a square, if your partner was an addict, you could go. You just had to give them everything, obviously. And from early on, members would call Chuck dad or daddy because he said that addicts and alcoholics are not adults and should not be treated as such.
I have so many thoughts right now.
I know we're both just like quiet.
It's like the ultimate power move, like, call me daddy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like kind of pathologically brilliant because if you think about it, especially if we're coming from these people had fathers who were from the 40s and the 50s, there's a real hierarchy and structure to what a dad is in those times. There's role definition is pretty de rigueur. You know what a man is supposed to be and what a dad is supposed to be. Whether or not they were good, that doesn't even matter. But that's a real power play he pulls right off the bat, which is clearly he's the most mature person on campus. He's the one. Mm-hmm. He's daddy.
Also, do you think the guys were calling him daddy?
It's not this century. Because now when you call somebody daddy, you know it's going to come with like a drink and a night out. So I'm just saying.
And like at least a slap on the ass and a little bit of hair pulling. Come on, Jen. Let's be real.
Thank you. Okay, I'm with you.
But yeah, okay, I guess even now, like, I think in the South, like, grown men will call their dads daddy, right? It's like a cultural thing.
Yeah, we don't see that a lot in California. It's not daddy, it's not the dad kind of dad, but we don't like to use as few syllables as possible in California. So, yeah.
Chabra.
Dad. That's right. Dude, I call everybody dude.
No,
God,
I
sorry,
know,
I
me
don't
too.
care about your pronouns. I'm like, dude. Dude is what I say.
Dude.
Nothing to do with gender. Dude is just gender free to me. I'm from California.
That's California slang.
My daughter calls me dude.
Dude, I totally get it. And like I said earlier, I said put a little bookmark in what will later become his slogan, and you have fucking heard this shit. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Chuck came up with that shit, and that's what he would say when people came in.
That is amazing to me. I similarly found that fun fact and thought, really, he was the first, like Socrates didn't manage to knock that out, or Aristotle? No, it was some chunky guy named Daddy, the ultimate bear, shall we say, who said today is the first day of the rest of your life.
Which means like everything before this, everything and everyone doesn't matter, right?
You know, that's so powerful because that's literally how he meant it, which is funny because for most of us, I think when we think today's the first day of the rest of your life, that's like opportunity and promise and not
like, I'm going to Peloton today and make a fucking smoothie. And like, today's the first day, the rest of my life. Then I'm like, you know what?
Okay, I was just going for like, I got dressed and showered, but okay, you go ride your Peloton.
Well, I was going to say it ends up, I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm going to watch Netflix and maybe eat ice cream for lunch.
It's called backwards lunch day. That's fine. Yeah. So
it's called balance, you know? I do both.
But his desire to negate their pasts, like to actually mean don't go backwards, just go forwards, is slightly, I think, on the pathological side of the world. Because if you don't have any connection to your past, I don't know how you go forward. You got to kind of make sure you're looking at both. But okay, Chuck, you do you.
Yeah, no, Chuck wants to do Chuck. And actually, we will talk more about Chuck doing Chuck and then Chuck doing everybody else doing them in when we get back from this break. Okay, friends, we're back. So this is around the time where Chuck introduced the game, which I mentioned earlier. The game is where one person would sit probably in the middle of the circle, or I don't know. They're all in a circle, I'm guessing. I don't know the formation. I'm not going to lie. But
I'm pretty sure the circle, yeah.
It seems like
these pictures I've seen, it had that kind of, very 60s vibey circle thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone was allowed to say anything, true or not, to someone to cause an effect. Like, Jen, you're a stupid fucking worthless piece of shit and everybody here hates you. And then if you were like, that's really mean, that would allow the rest of the group to jump on the bandwagon. We're talking Jane Fonda, Leonard Nimoy, Moses. They're all there. Jump telling you. Or I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe they had the game done to them too. But you know who never had the game done to him?
Chucky.
Yeah. Chuck didn't.
Well, his whole life kind of was the game, unfortunately. He did have his whole life was the game. It's interesting that when we talked about self-loathing, to me, I believe that's such a key component of his character, that this game, as I was reading about it, is such an expression of his desire to make other people feel like he's felt. Like, the way I got here is they tore me down. It's like, well, okay, that's not, you got here from a lot of really bad behavior and a lot of bad breaks too. And at no point did you look inward. Instead, you looked inward to take it back out and make this an external thing again. I mean, Chuck's really not big on self-reflection, but apparently he loves the game. Like, he gets off on it massively.
Oh, yeah.
And to hear these and, a trigger warning for people who can't stand loud noises, but this is like yelling and coming at you and coming in your face and being aggressive. And you're supposed to just endure it. It's meant to break you down.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine how fast that might happen if the whole room, if everyone in the room is coming for you and you can't wiggle out of it.
Within seconds, I would be broken down.
Right? I mean, these are already people who are vulnerable. That's how they got there, is their vulnerability. And now we're going to just play the game and play the game and play the game. And this was a lot. Right, Ash? Like, this stuff went on all the time.
Oh, yeah. And for like hours and hours.
Hours, yeah.
And this actually later became known as attack therapy. So that's pretty cool that the game turned into a specific actual type of therapy. It is fucking insane that he and Synanon are not more well known, considering how much influence he has had on so many fucking things. Because also, this is what later becomes the basis of most programs in the troubled teen industry, which I'm sure you know, Jen, eventually this leads to the creation of the troubled teen industry, Synanon, which we'll talk a little about, but honestly is its own whole fucking episode or series. I'm not sure which yet, but...
Yeah, and it's like crazy making... When you start to pivot to the troubled teen industry, it's horrifying.
Oh my God,
I have nothing else to say.
Yeah.
It's just horrifying.
And you guys, you'll hear why it's horrifying. We're going to talk about that. So Chuck started telling people, if you stay forever, we will create a utopian world. So he's saying, like, you can never graduate because you're always going to be an alcoholic or addict. He was really more focused on addicts. Life sucks out there anyways. And it's going to be fucking utopia. So people were like, cool, I'm down to chill and stay. And the way that Cinnabon, I've said this. The way that Synanon supported itself was like most cults and through a multi-prong system. Members would pay most, if not all of their income to Synanon. They began selling their own promotional items. They started buying up enterprises like gas stations, apartment buildings, all kinds of other businesses. And of course, was anybody paid who didn't have a job where they were bringing in the money to Synanon? No, because you're like paying to live in the Synanon utopia.
And so it's interesting. There's a book out by a child who was in Synanon and then got out. But one of the things he talks about is how those businesses, it became very much like a cult, a little bit like what you might experience in an LDS situation, where the businesses you went to were the businesses of your Synanon brothers and sisters, right? So you, as you lived in your world, you started to be so insulated and so surrounded and reliant upon the people that were in your utopia to provide you with the services you would normally get, which is an interesting contrast for when you leave, because suddenly when you leave, your whole infrastructure, your everything, your whole ecosystem is gone because you can't go back to any of your Synanon vendors. They won't see you. You are, I don't even know this word, apostate, but basically, you're out. Yeah, apostate. but you're out. Apostate is always a word that fascinates me. It's like so not the right word. Yeah.
If you leave, you're either just like shunned or they'll actually come fucking assault you and like almost kill you like they did to a few people. They get really fucking violent, which is like, what? I know that sounds surprising, probably. Maybe not after the game, but he says that the only thing that's not allowed in the game is threats of physical violence. But at one point, Chuck gets super overzealous during a session of the game and pours a root beer over a girl's head. And this is seen as an act of violence. And this is actually kind of a bit of a key turning point because this is when acts of violence start to become like more acceptable. And then, of course, you know, acts of violence are always in cults most acceptable on the children. I don't know why that is. That just seems to be the fucking case a lot of the times. It's like, hey, you know who's not doing anything wrong? The kids. Let's start beating the shit out of them. We're not there yet, but it just is an interesting little fact that from Chuck pouring root beer on a girl's head in the game, it did lead to more of an acceptance of violence, which really fucking escalates. So they bought up a beachside hotel in Santa Monica called Club de Casa del Mar, and they had a ton of other real estate holdings as well. They had about $2.5 million. And like I said, they paid no taxes because of the charitable drug rehabilitation status. And when Synanon bought Club de Casa del Mar, they kicked out all of the club members. This really fucking pissed off the town of Santa Monica. So they sent cops and bulldozers to destroy the cabanas and the rest of the beachfront property, which is like pretty uncool. You're not just like allowed to do that, you know? So Chuck threatened to sue the city of Santa Monica, stating that they were run by mad dogs, and Santa Monica, realizing that their actions had not been super legal or cool, and realizing that they could be vulnerable to a lawsuit, they just decided to leave Synanon alone. And moving forward from then, property-wise, the cult became pretty fucking untouchable.
Now, over the course of this time, I don't know where it is on the timeline, but he's also setting up compounds out in the rural areas of California, right? This is kind of, I think of it, I liken it to the scientists who, Christian Science, have their big facility in Hollywood, right there in the base of the Hollywood Hills. And this is kind of
Scientology, right?
Yeah, Scientology's big building at the base of the Hollywood Hills. That's kind of their show place. But really, most of their stuff's happening out in the desert and other faraway places. Same with Synanon. He's got this hub here in Santa Monica, which is kind of the show place. But he's building compounds out in rural California where now you're really isolated if you're out there at those compounds because you're far from everything. You're going to need a car to get to anywhere pretty much.
Oh, yeah. We're talking Marin County, Northern California. He's really spreading his wings throughout California. He's moving from Southern California to Northern California. And like you're saying, Jen, there was a lot of really isolated places, which will come into play when we talk about the punk squad, which is where it like really starts to get super bad.
Are you referring to his paramilitary, adorable band of brothers?
Oh, before that, this story, I was like, how the fuck did I not know about this shit? And on that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Yeah, so they're buying stuff everywhere. In 1970, to free up their time to better serve Synanon, parents had to give their children over to be raised in the, quote, hatchery. Like they were fucking eggs, like chickens or something. Okay, you just had a baby, but they had this center where like a couple of the cult members would just watch over all of the babies. So that was really fucked up too, because a lot of the kids in the cult barely knew their parents. And Synanon started receiving juvenile delinquents through the court system and, quote, troubled teens through churches and concerned parents. This creates the punk squad, which is basically the godfather of the TTI industry, or of the troubled teen industry.
So this is important to know that during this time, if you're living on one of these compounds, apparently Chuck is broadcasting all the time.
Oh,
Like all you hear over the microphone all the time is his words constantly, just constantly on in your head. He loved the sound of his own voice, supposedly, and he's just talking and talking. And it doesn't matter what compound you're at. That's the one part of technology they managed to nail down. He was broadcasting everywhere.
24 hours a day. It was called The Wire. And a lot of it, as Chuck starts to become crazier, is talking about the enemy and how they have to get the enemy. And
If only there were a parallel in today's universe that could help us understand what it's like when a madman has a microphone and talks about destroying people on Earth, people in his own country. Anyway, political stopping now. But I mean, it's the same concept, which is, right, you give this crazy man a microphone and he's telling you that there's enemies out there. And because that's all you hear and because you're isolated, that's what you're going to believe. Why would you not trust daddy?
why would you not trust daddy? Mm-hmm. This is when physical violence starts being incorporated into Synanon, is with the punk squad. These teenage children would be physically abused, emotionally destroyed through the game. Sometimes the game would go on for like 32 fucking hours. Stripped naked and humiliated, beaten, and this was all by grown adults. And this is supposed to help kids who are smoking joints here and there or something.
Yeah, it's a good time to picture that 16-year-old you know that already is struggling with his identity, with how he looks, with who he's with, if she should have sex or not, all those things that are complicated enough at that age. And you've dabbled in drugs because, oh yeah, probably your home life is fucking fantastic.
Or because it's the fucking 60s, right?
Yeah.
Hella,
I mean,
or the 70s.
here we go, right? You know, it is the 60s. And that's back to the dope fiends, right? Marijuana you were a dope fiend if you used weed, a dope fiend. So here you are taking these children and throwing them in this chaos that is so abusive. Yeah, Ashley and I get a little worked up on this one.
We
just
do.
So abusive.
Yeah. It's really, the troubled teen industry is probably going to be a season because I think it should be talked about extensively. And we'll get a little bit into the politics of that later too. But this is something that's kind of like really fucked up but cool about this story is, so they would take these kids to like fucking isolated places, like rural farmland. And these kids would like constantly escape and show up at these farmers' houses being like, I'm being like fucking starved and abused and shit. So like these farmers started kind of like an underground railroad for these kids. It's really cool. It's like these rural farmers who are kind of like the fucking badasses of this story. And I know that at least 2 of them were violently assaulted because of this.
And that has tied back into this man, again, putting out messages nonstop, telling you who the bad people are. And the bad people got to go. And then he's got his paramilitary young punks who are hearing him and listening to everything he's saying and believing that they need to fight for the just cause, protect daddy at all costs. We must treat the bad people badly. So he's just building on violence. And we know now that that kind of speech, inflamed speech, can lead to violence.
Absolutely. And which it definitely does. He also obviously issues, quote, containment, which means you cannot have contact with outsiders. And soon violence was also permitted on apostates, suspected enemies or spies or suspected thieves. It really feels kind of like Scientology's like fair game, how it's like if they're against us, it's very us versus them. And if they are against us, then we can do whatever the fuck we want to them, including, you know, like beat them into a coma or whatever. And at this time, Chuck decides to start trying his experience on LSD with environmental manipulation called the trip. And the trip was considered like almost sacred. Like if you were selected for it, it was like this great honor. And basically, because this is his way, it was all about breaking down the tripper physically stripping them down, changing them into white robes, mentally stripping away their past sins with an extreme version of the game. Then they were informed that they had been chosen because they were resistors or dingbats and needed to write letters of confession. Then at the, quote, witching hour, they busted out the Ouija board, and operators of the board would spell out messages mostly based on Emerson's self-reliance. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote a book called Self-Reliance, and Chuck basically treated it like his Bible. So keep in mind, they're not on drugs during any of this. He's just trying to create the experience that he had on LSD. So then they would have this sleep deprivation phase, which would basically like just drive them to start crying and hallucinating and shit, because that sounds like quite the fucking day. Then they would come out the next morning and like Synanon members would be cheering and like, you know, they're all fucking disoriented in their robes and everybody's like, yeah. And it was this whole big thing. Chuck said, quote, "At the end of this rainbow, there will be a pot of gold. Through dissipation or long hours of activity without very much sleep, we hope to bring about in you a conscious state of inebriation. We want to get you loaded without acid."
So he replicates being kidnapped and having to rely on your kidnapper for survival. He strips you of everything that you know, including even your clothing. They fuck with your brain in a way that your brain can't even, God knows what's happening to all your dopamine and serotonin and everything else that you're going through this. They've dysregulated you like crazy. And then the outcome is, do you feel as cool as I did after I took LSD?
Right.
Whoa. That is some messed up thinking. Wow.
And then he takes away smoking, which is like, that actually did cause a pretty big exodus. People are like, you know what, dude? The rest I can take, but you're taking away my cigarettes? That's a step too far, pal. So,
Holy crap.
As it goes in cults, as things start to escalate, it causes some members to leave and it causes the members who stay to like really dig their heels into their beliefs.
Yeah, of course. If you can tolerate all this and you decide to stay, you are a true believer. You have to be, right? I mean, psychologically, you have to be.
Absolutely. And I think that he had tried to get that health license exemption because they had made a makeshift medical facility and were like treating patients. This is all in air quotes. And by the mid-70s, authorities and even the health department, who they supposedly didn't need to answer to, were like, hey, this isn't cool. Because as I'll get to soon, he starts making mandatory vasectomies and abortions because children are just like a total fucking drain on the system. And he's having these done in his Synanon medical facilities that are not in any way qualified for fucking anything.
So let's take a minute on that because that's one of the things we bookmarked. First, he decides kids can go be raised in the hatchery, which is a foul reference, again, from our 1700s. But we go to the hatchery and the kids are being raised by these caregivers, which is a broad term and it wasn't. And some were caring and some were not. Mm-hmm. But the kids have to rely on one another for affiliation. And it's way fucked up because they don't have identities particularly established at this point. They're little kids. So he's decided first kids have to be relegated to the hatchery. Then he decides kids are bad. And this, for me, the bookmark goes all the way back now to his childhood, because in his childhood, kids were one of two things. They were either essential for mom's survival until she met a man, or they died. His brother left him.
They left.
I mean, it's that kind of screwed up thing, which, you know, he knew his brother couldn't control it, but he still left him. And so he was abandoned by children. He wasn't allowed to be a child. So of course he ends up later in life as the madness of Chuck starts to really unspool. You can't have babies. You must abort the baby in you. And children are bad. Children are a drain on the system, and they're a financial drain as well.
Even a woman who was 4 months pregnant was forced to get an abortion. And I don't know a lot about pregnancy, but I feel like at that point, like you've got a good bump going on and stuff, right?
You may or may not have felt it, but you know, by 4 months. I mean, so let's be clear. The requirement was, well, they didn't want you to leave. They just obeyed. They obeyed daddy, which is It's just I mean, this is how abuse happens, right? This is what happens in the churches. This is what happens in any place where a system is built with a person who believes they have and you give your power over to someone, all your power over to someone. Of course, it never fails to degenerate into something that's incredibly toxic and abusive and where you are going to be harmed. It just can't. It seems like it can't not happen.
You know, it's really interesting too, because you said daddy had like the ultimate figure of power, but also like AA says that they're not religious, but a lot of meetings are closed with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Like, I'm not religious at all, and I know that shit by heart. Our Father. Like, God is looked at as the Father. So him saying, I'm Dad, aka the Father, like he's setting himself up for a position of I am God. And actually, when he tries to create the Church of Synanon, which is unsuccessful, somebody wrote, "Who will God be?" Like,
right?
So if we're creating a church, who's God?
Jeff does that over in the LDS story. We've got David Koresh doing that in his story. I mean, frankly, in the world I come from, on the serial killer side, that we've got the same dynamic, right? There's this narcissism that they have been bestowed with some privilege and some power to make the decisions about life and death, and they believe it and they act on it.
I think they do believe it. That's something I question a lot. Like, how much do they believe their own bullshit? And I think, you know, they say the path to hell is paved with good intentions. And I do think that, I don't know how much of the time, but like, sometimes I believe that people do really start these groups or communities with good intentions. And then like just like the power and shit just goes to their head and then shit gets bananas.
But you know what? It's on us too. This is on us too, because anytime someone is in a position of power, this is this statement. We have to speak truth to the power. That is on every human's responsibility, is to not follow blindly. I'm Jewish, so I love Judaism, which is like, don't believe in God until you question God. That's the whole, to me, like that's the whole faith. If you don't know how to question God, what are you doing?
Cool.
Don't ever, ever, ever believe God first run out, because that's just obedience. What we're looking here for is, I want you to believe, but I want you to believe because you questioned and you challenged and you spoke the truth.
See, that's funny because in Judaism, they say, if you're not questioning shit, then like get out. Where in Mormonism, they say, put your questions on the shelf. No questions allowed. If you have questions, you just go ahead and put those on the shelf. Which I think maybe that could be an important distinction between like cults and religion. Like, are you allowed to ask questions? Because in cults, no. The answer is a big capital N-O.
And if you deviate, you are ostracized.
Oh, yeah, or assaulted. And on that note, we're going to take one more commercial break. And when we come back, we will wrap up this fucking shit show. Okay, and we're back. So like Jen alluded to earlier, they created their own militaristic entity called Her Majesty's Imperial Marine Corps. So this was because Chuck's wife, Betty, mostly oversaw it at first. I think that's where the Her Majesty's part came in. And they also had their own form of martial art called Sindo. So...
yeah, breathe that in.
Yeah, let's just take that in. They decided to create their own military and train their own military in their own style of martial art called Sindo, which I would love to see someone do a Sindo demonstration. I'd be very fascinated by that.
Yeah, anybody have that video? Let us know. I'd love to see some Sindo.
Yes, please let us know. Fuck. Now I feel like I'm going to go down like a gnarly YouTube hole and be like, I have to find it.
I've been watching like these Proud Boys and these Oath Keepers do their little shield stuff. And it's like, it's got to be as good as that, right? It's got to be. It's got to be as good as those videos we see.
We got to find it. If anybody knows any sources, send them over. Yeah. Okay. So in February of 76, Chuck decides to decrease the size of the organization in order to, quote, shake off the uncommitted, non-producing members.
Yeah, it's layoffs.
Mass layoffs.
We're back to our corporate model. Mass layoffs. You got to go.
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, cults do not want lazy, non-productive members. Like, they want smart, producing people, you know?
Weren't productive in Synanon, you gotta go.
Yeah, you gotta go. In 1977, when Betty died, this sent old Chuck even more spiraling out of control. And at this point,
Her Majesty passed away?
Her Majesty
goodness.
passed. And also, they did often sit on thrones dressed in robes. So they did have a very like His and Her Majesty vibe going on.
Why have we not had a true life historical fiction movie of this?
Where's the fucking movie? No.
Right?
So he announced that he would be taking applications for wives. He got a whopping 6, which I think is really funny because I think he was probably expecting way more, but only 6 gals wanted to take on Daddy as a hub. And he was like so into this whole like new marriage thing that he declared that all married couples had to break up every 3 years and get assigned a new partner by Synanon.
Now we're back to the key party. I knew we'd end up at key party.
Oh, yeah.
I knew it. Every time when it starts, the debauchery starts.
He's like, put your keys in the bowl. I'm still going to like put them in the bowls that I want to, but you know, just for the
But we're all
sake
just
of.
changing partners.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yep. It's that time.
I wonder why 3 years was like 3 years, huh? That seems a long
Maybe
time,
he
actually.
wanted to ditch his wife after 3 years.
Oh, okay.
That's
You're
probably
right.
why. He was like, you know what? I had Betty for like a while. That was awesome. I've had 3 years with Sheila, and I feel like 3 years is good. I think I'm ready
Yeah.
for somebody new. I bet that's what it was. And he was like, if that's what Chuck was doing, then, you know, that's what everybody's doing.
Divine intervention. That's right. I'm inspired. Yeah, 3 years. Okay, so there you go. Anybody past 3 years right now in their relationship, I'd like to congratulate you, and it's time to put your keys in the bowl.
Bow, chicka, bow, wow. That's going to be the background music for this episode. So the Imperial Marines attacked over 40 people across the country. They would attack anyone who got too close to the property. They would go beat the fuck out of ex-members. They put one guy into a coma. They fucking hung one dude's dog. This guy comes home and finds his fucking dog hung. I know that's like what it's like. People get more upset about like animal murder than person murder, but it's like, come on, man. That's just really fucked up. I mean, so is the rest of this, but
Their kind of violence was pretty creative.
oh, it was fucking creative. He starts, you know, Chuck's like declaring a holy war because, you know, there's people are criticizing and whatnot. And he instructs his followers to basically like harm whoever you need to stand up for Synanon. And if you went to jail for it, because you better not fucking say that you're doing it for Synanon, but you should go to jail for it, because if you do, guess what? You're a martyr, because, hey, didn't that happen to Chuck? Old Chuck got sent to jail, then he was a martyr. So he's like, look, go out and do my bidding. He fucking had a woman in a pre-psychotic break kidnapped, and they fucking transferred her to this place called Tamales Bay so that she like couldn't get to her family. And this is a big, awesome turning point, because this is when attorney Paul Morantz gets involved, because her husband hires him and he's like, hey, this fucking cult kidnapped my wife who is on the verge of losing her goddamn mind.
Can I just add an anecdote to that story? Because
yeah, please.
What's interesting is law enforcement, when the husband first tries to pursue this case and say, look, they kidnapped my wife, they've moved her to another part of the state. Like, what the hell? In fact, I don't even know if he knew they moved her right away. The police say she's an adult and she can do what she wants, which is to me both true and are you crazy? So if that's the answer, if you're an adult and you can do what you want, how do you handle any kidnapping?
Right.
Like, that's not how kidnapping works. How about we ask her if this is what she wants? They were not prepared to go to that level. And that's, if you ever dealt with a police officer who was like, well, you know, they're an adult, they can do what they want. Say, no, we're going to go ask them. And if they confirm, then at that point, fine. As long as you know they're not under arrest and not being threatened, and there's nothing, you know, nobody's told them they're going to kill me because I'm looking for them. It's just, we got to listen to each other, people, more. Like,
I'm pretty sure getting kidnapped is also like against your will, like by definition, but
they suggested she left with them willingly. But yeah, Exactly.
And they actually had a lot of powerful lawyers within their group. So that really helped them in squashing lawsuits and negative media coverage and shit, you know. So in 1978, some Synanites actually bought stock in ABC because ABC was like throwing shade at them. So they go to a stock shareholders meeting and they read out the names of the other stockholders. They identified themselves as, wait for it, Murder Inc. and ask the men in the rooms if their wives had bodyguards.
Holy crap. Whoa. That is some terrorism right there. That is some domestic terrorism, man.
The Murder Inc., though, like, I mean, obviously you can't help but think of the record label. Like,
holy crap. Can you imagine? And you know, if you haven't been to a shareholder meeting for stock, it's a formal thing.
I certainly have not.
It is a big damn deal. And the idea of them coming in and doing such a low-key threat it must have just shocked people.
Well, yeah.
Just shocked the hell out of them.
I mean, yeah. And Chuck was like openly opposing anybody who opposed Synanon. And like they bought $200,000 worth of weapons, which is about $1 million in today's money.
Well, I was just going to say, and so you have Marantz working for this husband and wife team, and things get weird.
Hairy. Weird. Yeah. He makes Chuck's shit list. And Chuck says something akin to, don't mess with us. You can get killed dead. I will break. And he's talking about Marantz. I'll break him and his wife's legs. I'll cut off his child's arms. And I want an ear and a glass of alcohol on my desk. He like openly said that. I'm not exactly sure where, and that's not an exact quote, but he did say those things about Marantz.
It turns out they taped nonstop at the facility everything he said.
People are so fucking stupid. Oh my God.
It's always on tape, right? Like
oh my God.
It's always on tape.
It's like, hey, I'm going to murder somebody and film myself.
I guess he was so provoked that Marantz won the case and got the woman out. The woman had legit been kidnapped. He got a settlement against them. Like this, Chuck was pissed. So when they didn't have that tape right away, but one of the prosecutors had someone tell him existed. And that's when they went in to get the tape. And that tape clearly was everything.
Yeah, it's not super cool to say that kind of stuff.
Tell us what happened in Marantz. What did they do?
So, yes, as Jen alluded to earlier, they were pretty fucking creative with their torture of people or, you know, assaults, attempted murders. They put a 4.5-foot rattlesnake in his fucking mailbox. They even removed the rattler to keep it quiet. 4.5 fucking feet. These things are very deadly. It bit him and put him in the hospital for 11 days, and he has since suffered lifelong complications from the venom poisoning, requiring monthly blood transfusions. They like fucked him up for life.
And he knew. When he felt the pain that in that moment in the mailbox, he knew he was screaming, Synanon, they got me.
Oh, yeah.
Synanon, they got me.
Yeah, he's like, Synanon. He knew. He fucking knew. And Walter Cronkite said that their behavior was, quote, bizarre even by cult standards, which I thought was pretty fucking hilarious. It's like, it's fucking weird what you guys are up to. So a warrant branching from that incident led to the audio tape in which he says, quote, we're not going to mess with the old time turn the other cheek religious postures. Our religious posture is, don't mess with us. You can get killed, literally dead. These are real threats. Another one. They are draining life's blood from us and expecting us to play by their silly rules. We will make the rules. I see nothing frightening about it. I am quite willing to break some lawyer's legs and next break his wife's legs and threaten to cut their child's arm off. This is the end of that, lawyer. That is a very satisfactory, humane way of transmitting information. I really do want an ear and a glass of alcohol on my desk. End quote. That's the real quote. Fucking psycho.
And minions that were prepared to carry it out. True believers.
Ugh. Yeah, and he also on tape bragged about the beatings and the Imperial Marine training and a bunch of other fucking bullshit. And that's what allowed the DA to get him on a murder charge. And they issued an arrest warrant. Guess what? Chuck, okay, look, relapse isn't funny. In this case, I'm happy.
It's a little funny.
They found Chuck fucking fucked the fuck up with a bottle of empty Chivas Regal in front of him. They had to literally, when they arrested him, carry him out on a stretcher because he was so shit-canned.
And he wasn't at the facility, right? He had left. He was like kind of on the lam, which is the term for on the run. Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't riding a baby sheep.
Yeah, he knew he was in trouble. He knew he was convicted. I guess he was trying to drink himself to death,
Maybe.
He was
like,
so
fuck
incredibly
it.
drunk.
YOLO.
Like, you got to work hard to get that drunk. I mean, you have to really be guzzling to get that drunk.
Hard alcohol is like so gnarly. And that's why it's not surprising that the 1600s were the fucking beginning of the downfall of civilization. Although I think it's the downfall of man has been happening since the creation of man. But anywho, we could talk about so much for so many hours, Jen. Let me wrap this up. So, Marantz was like a fucking saint. He actually said that he would be cool with Chuck just being fined and given probation and being banned from having associations with Synanon instead of jail time. Which, if that were me, I'd be like, hey, motherfucker, you tried to murder me with a rattlesnake. I don't care if you're like old and not in good health. You fucking have ruined a fuck ton of people's lives. You should rot. Like DeAngelo. Like, what if somebody was like, oh, DeAngelo, yeah, he's like fucking old. Just let him chill. That is such fucking horse shit. I can't even deal. So I don't know.
And it's interesting too, because when Marantz decided that, I don't know if he understood the scope of the crimes. Because, and that is actually an interesting thing from a victim point of view, is that when you're thinking of your case, you're very focused on your case. And until you take that step out and say, wait, is there more? Because it's counterintuitive to kind of let go of your case and try to do the bigger picture. Just it's a step. You have to take that step with intention. And I don't know that Marantz, he was made so sick by the toxins and the rattlesnake venom. You know, he didn't come back to his regular self at all. He came back to this compromised man. And so, you know, I think he was probably pretty grateful he was alive and maybe didn't see beyond his case, because Chucky definitely had deserved jail. Prison. That man had earned it. I'm just not sure Marantz knew. I only know because of my personal point of view, but when you're in your case and you're talking to the prosecutor about charges and criminality and all that of the suspect, like DeAngelo, you tend to think of just your case and not the bigger picture. Now, in my case, we had a crime that had many other crimes, so we kind of had to eat the whole Megillah. But I'm not sure Marantz had access to all the other crimes that Daddy was committing. So I think it was both magnanimous of Marantz and also probably a function of how he had been changed by it, that he did have that kind of grace in that moment.
Wow. That's crazy and fucked up and all sorts of shit. The Department of Justice sued Synanon in the 80s because they owed about $17 million in back taxes, which today I don't even fucking know how much that would be. But that's a lot. So they declared bankruptcy and closed their doors in 91, although there might still be one branch in Germany. I'm not quite sure, but there might still be one operating Synanon branch. Chuck died in 1997 and was mourned openly in the House of Representatives. They said that his practices had a big influence on drug rehabilitation, and no fewer than 50 programs are based on Chuck's gnarly fucking bullshit. In 1971, the government gave a big grant to an organization called The Seed, which was where they used Synanon tactics on kids who were suspected of drug use. It was said that they used brainwashing tactics akin to North Korea. That's the bad one, right?
Yeah, that's
North Korea. That's the bad one.
That is the bad one.
Let me just double check.
That's the bad one. I'm just so disappointed that we perpetuated this.
No, and you will continue to be, unfortunately. a program called Straight Inc. was created from Synanon, and that created the program Scared Straight, which you've probably seen. Like, they have fucking shows on Discovery Channel or something called Scared Straight, where they take kids into prisons and the prisoners are like, do you want to get fucking raped in your ass every day? And they try to like scare them straight. But anyways, that came from Synanon.
It's funny because I lived through that. That was such a huge trend. I want to say late 80s, early 90s, late 80s, maybe, the Scared Straight thing, which was, I get it, except all I feel like it did is it made Black men scary. That's what it did. That's the trope that it played out, because mostly what you saw, generally, it would be angry Black men in prison trying to scare children. Oh, wait, what color were those children? Oh, yeah, probably not Black. It just played out a trope that, you know, makes me want to scream.
I wouldn't even be surprised, because it always goes to the top that maybe that was part of their fucking aim.
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Yep. Demonize
the Black man more, you know?
Yeah.
Nancy Reagan's favorite program was Scared Straight. She loved it. Big fan. And the Grand Ole Party, as it's called, is very much so in bed with the troubled teen industry, because the founder of Scared Straight became a big person in the Republican Party. There were like all these programs that had been opened, but then shut down because of mass child abuse. And then they were allowed to reopen under new names and with the same staff. And just to wrap it up with a little bit of where we're at and to leave it on a nice depressing note, these military and wilderness camps and boarding schools and stuff are still very much prevalent today. There's a fucking ton of molestation, medical neglect, mental and physical abuse, starvation, etc. going on. And I stopped counting after 2004 because you and I needed to record. But up to 2004, 126 children have died in those programs. From suicide, medical neglect, fucking homicide from being restrained and shit. I kind of glanced. It's probably closer to 160 now.
So we bring that right up to the present day, because this is taking care of troubled teens in this very top-down, authoritative manner is absolutely a moneymaker for many of the millionaire and billionaire people that are in our country today. And the reason that they want to prevent abortions is that without babies to fill the pipeline, and you know these babies are going to be in hella trouble. The ones that need to not have a baby are the ones who can't afford to have a baby. So this is all about follow the money. And if there's any life lessons in life, it's follow the money every time. And you can find out the why for the what every time. Follow the money.
Oh my God. That's like fucking insane that you could bring it back in a loop like that. Yeah, because the troubled teen industry is a very lucrative one, and it's run by very powerful people who have a lot of money, who want to continue having a lot of money at the expense of children.
At expense of the hatchery. And so, yeah, this is all about monetizing humans for profit. And it is why they have political action committees and why they pay their political leaders well to look out for them when it comes to tax breaks, laws, lack of reform. We just don't care. They're troubled teens, and probably many of them are people of color anyway, so they're dispensable. It's sickening. It's so sickening, and it is absolutely alive in our culture today.
You know what else it is? It's really foul.
It is foul.
I had to end it on a light note.
Who knew that would be the word of the podcast? Foul.
Yeah, foul. Hey, bird. The bird is the word. Okay, I'm gonna let you go. It's Labor Day. You go enjoy a barbecue or something. I don't know. You know what?
Oh, that's
Fucking
so
do whatever you want.
That's right.
Jen, thank you so fucking much for coming on. I always love talking to you. Where can the people find you?
The easiest place to find me and all of my fun, including everything about the murder and the lawyer's daughter, is at j-carole.com. Just first initial, last name, and everything's there, and you can pick and pluck your way through fun, including even some of my crocheting, because, you know, that's me. I crochet.
Because we gotta have fun.
That's right. That's my moment of zen.
There you go. I love that. Maybe we should end with a moment of zen. That's what we'll do today. We're going to end with a moment of zen, and whatever that is for you, for Jen, it's crocheting. Have a moment of zen for yourself today, you guys. And I think I mentioned it's Labor Day. This is going to come out in like November, so that's pretty funny. I'm very ahead of schedule. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. Please follow us on social media at TSFU the podcast. That's the hub for everything TSFU and TSFU Presents. Please rate, subscribe, and review. I know it's like, oh, all the podcasters ask for it, but it's because it really does help us. So would love that. That's it.
Yay. Okay, cool. That was fun.
Bum 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 bum. That's fucked up. So fucked up. Can't you see? It's just really fucked. That's fucked up.